All right, good evening. I want to thank you for the invitation. And I when I was on contract with the Smithsonian, that was a month-long contract, and I lived in College Park at the time. That was back in 1986, and I don't think I've been there since, and I apologize that I haven't. But I wanted to also compliment you all on the Maryland Biodiversity Project. I follow that on iNaturalist, and I wish that could be exported to every state in the union and maybe every country for that matter. Excellent work for those of you participating in that. Thank you. Um, so this evening, I want to first address why so many people hate wasps. Then I want to give you all the reasons we should love them, and then talk about what is a wasp and if you want to observe them, how to do that, and what kinds of behaviors you're likely to see when you are looking at wasps, because they engage in a number of fascinating behaviors. And I'll talk a little bit about how you can help wasps and by extension help, promote biodiversity, period, especially of other insects as well. And with that, let's see if I can advance my slides. I've had this problem before. There we go. So why do we tend to despise wasps? Well, my theory is that it's these guys. It's this minority of social wasps that we have the most encounters with and the most negative encounters with. I mean, we run our lawnmowers over underground nests of yellow jackets. We bump into the nests that are in the trees. They come and pilfer our food from our picnics and barbecues. I mean, it's no wonder that we get aggravated with them. And of course, they sting. We would like to avoid pain whenever possible. So that's understandable. We also have other kinds of social wasps. The European hornet, of course, is the only hornet so far that has established itself in North America, in the eastern United States. And they typically nest in hollow trees like this one in New Jersey. Um, then we have paper wasps, and they build those uncovered paper combs under the eaves of houses and other human structures inside birdhouses, that kind of thing. And so again, these are wasps that we typically have negative encounters with. Now, to be fair, other people sometimes do recognize non-social wasps as wasps, and in particular, mud daubers. But again, we have kind of a negative impression of those too. I mean, we look at a mud dauber nest and it looks like somebody threw a dirt clod on the side of our house or something, and so a lot of people think of their nests as unsightly and therefore the wasps themselves as unwelcome. Well, then why should we love wasps? Well, number one reason is their diversity. The social wasps are an infinitesimal minority of wasps. The overwhelming majority of wasps are solitary. That means every female lives her own life and may or may not create a nest on her own, but there's not a great number of them per nest. They're tiny. These three photos were taken through a microscope to give you some idea of how tiny wasps can be. And this is the majority of diversity in wasps is under 10 millimeters, probably under 5 millimeters. And so the fairy flies, for example, on the far left photo there, the smallest of those, maybe the smallest insects known. Some barely exceed the size of the largest one-celled protozoan. So that gives you an idea of how incredibly tiny wasps can be. They can't sting. The majority of wasps do not have a sting. They have a conventional ovipositor or egg-laying organ. In the ones that do sting, only the females can do so because that ovipositor has changed over into, it's been weaponized, if you will, into a sting that delivers venom, mostly to dispatch or paralyze host insects that they feed on. They're ecologically important. We'll address that in a moment. And they offer you free pest control in your garden and sometimes elsewhere. So, what's not to love? Again, going back to, wait a minute, there's indoor wasps? Uh, okay. Yeah, there are. Unfortunately, they're not that common, but the ensign wasps, they're they they're non-stinging wasps. They're fairly small, about between 5 and 10 millimeters, but the female lays a single egg in a cockroach egg capsule, and then the larva that hatches from her egg consumes all the cockroach eggs in that capsule. And then, of course, she repeats this from as many egg capsules as she can find. So if you see one of these in your house, that doesn't necessarily mean you have roaches, but it may mean you won't have them anymore. The flat-backed wasps do sting, and they're very tiny. It's surprising though how painful a sting could be from such a tiny wasp. But again, these are not very common, and they go after things like carpet beetle larvae, the caterpillars of clothes moths, so things that are much more impactful as pests than the wasps themselves. A personal reason I love wasps is because I think they're gorgeous. They can come in all kinds of colors. Some of them are vividly metallic. Most of them are colored in contrasting patterns of black and white, yellow, orange, or red. And of course, that is something called aposomatic. They're aposomatic, meaning they have warning colors. So those bright colors communicate the fact that they can defend themselves if necessary, and so best not to mess with them. Well, a more practical reason to love wasps is because of the ecosystem services that they provide, and that includes pollination. Now, most wasps are what would be classified as flower visitors. That means they go to flowers for nectar. And okay, by the way, maybe they get a little pollen on them and they cart that to the next series of flowers that they visit. But most wasps are not the kind of effective pollinators we think of when we think of bees, for example. They're not actively harvesting pollen. But there is an exception to that, and that is the pollen wasps, such as the one on the left. Pollen wasps are found mostly in Africa and Australia, but they are found globally. And in the United States, they're found in the Western US and in the genus Pseudomyceras. And here we have a female entering a penstemon blossom to imbibe nectar and pollen. She doesn't have pollen baskets like a bee, so she ingests the pollen and nectar and then takes it back to her nest and regurgitates it into the cell as food for a larval offspring. These pollinate penstemons almost exclusively, by the way, so they're oligolectic, meaning they only have that one kind of flower that they do business with. Now, this is something that's not in the book. And unfortunately, I learned about this uh, kind of behavior after the fact, after I wrote the book. But some of you may be familiar with myrmecochory, which is seed distribution by ants. Well, it turns out that in some cases, social wasps perform the same kind of function of seed dispersal, but only on certain plants. Plants that produce seeds with an attachment called an elaiosome are the ones that these wasps are going after. The elaiosome is a protein and fat rich body that is attached to the seed. And so the wasp comes, cuts the whole thing off the plant, goes somewhere, and then gnaws off the elaiosome to take back to the nest because of course they're feeding their larval siblings back at the nest, right? So they got to provide them with protein and fats. And then as a matter of course, the seed falls to the ground wherever the wasp has taken the whole apparatus to cut off the elaiosome with. So trillium would be one example of a plant that wasps seem to distribute the seeds for.
Eric, I have a quick question. On your picture there, figure L, there looks like there was a little number on the back of the wasp.
Ah,
Is that
Um,
right?
yeah, it looks like that somebody was tagging those wasps
Yeah.
for research. I pulled the graphic and I honestly didn't see that when I was looking at that.
That's no, it's very interesting. I have never seen a wasp with a tag on it. I suppose, I've seen butterflies and other insects perhaps, but I didn't see one like this. So that's pretty cool. Number 52, it looks like.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So, wasps also figure into the food system and that, or the food web, and that starts with herbivory, believe it or not, and in particular, gall wasps. Gall wasps are true wasps. They're very small, usually under 5 millimeters again, but the female lays her eggs in plant tissue. This is usually in the eastern United States, is going to be oaks and sometimes things in the rose family. And the either she injects a chemical with that egg, or the feeding activity of the larva that hatches initiates these galls, which are basically structures on the plant that are nutrient sinks. And so a disproportionate amount of nutrients is funneled to that gall-like structure, and inside of which is one or more larval wasps. And they're using that gall as both a food and a pretty impregnable home as far as most potential predators are concerned. But there are, of course, naturally, parasitoid wasps that attack gall makers. And so if you take home a gall and you try and rear it out, you're most likely not going to get whatever wasp initiated the gall. You're going to get some kind of parasitoid or inquiline. That's another wasp that usurped the original gall maker. So it's a fun exercise, and we don't know that much about the relationships between gall makers and their parasitoids. So if you think about rearing galls over the winter, I would encourage that. But the galls don't harm the plant. It looks like it's a tumor, but it's not a tumor, to quote Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's just, like I said, a nutrient sink that serves as food and shelter for the wasp. Wasps have their biggest impact on other insects. And so we have a couple of different ways they go about it. These examples here are both parasitoid wasps. Parasitoid meaning a parasite that invariably kills its host. But these two wasps are going about it in two totally different ways. On the left, we have an ichneumon wasp, and she is inserting an egg into a very small caterpillar. And my first thought when I saw this was, well, okay, how is such a big wasp going to come out of that caterpillar? And it turns out that the wasp larva, once it hatches within the caterpillar host, simply waits patiently and lets the caterpillar continue growing, feeding and growing, and then it reaches a critical mass, quite literally, where the it stimulates the wasp larva to begin feeding on the host. And so this caterpillar will be able to mature to a degree, and then somebody's not muted, but I'm laughing too. The wasp larva starts feeding on it and will either exit the caterpillar or exit the pupal stage, and then that stage will reproduce. So this is a wasp, the ichneumon, that attacks a host in situ, and then it flies off to find another host and do the same thing. On the right-hand side, we have a mud dauber, which is an example of a mass provisioner. She hunts spiders, and she paralyzes the spider with her sting and then carts it back to her mud nest, stuffs it in the mud cell with a bunch of other spiders, lays a single egg, and then makes another mud cell and repeats the whole process. Well, you might ask, well, why is she only paralyzing the spider instead of killing it outright? Well, she doesn't want that food item to spoil. And since they don't have refrigeration, keeping the host alive long enough for her larval offspring to start feeding is the next best thing. It's gruesome, but it's extremely effective. And of course, wasps themselves are consumed by other organisms, including vertebrates. There are some birds that have no problem feeding on wasps, like the western tanager there on the left. It'll either yank the sting out of the wasp before it eats it, or bang the wasp into submission on a twig or branch. Lizards, they're heavily armored and pretty impervious to stings, so they can snack on wasps at will. And of course, spiders, and then there's other insects that also prey on wasps. A number of them, like the crab spider and the ambush bug, are ambush hunters that sit in wait on flowers or plants for a potential victim to come within in reach. And their venoms are so potent that they can pretty much instantly paralyze their victim, and that's how they can get away with killing insects that are several times their size. The the hanging thief is an example of robber flies. They hunt a lot like a flycatcher bird would. So they sit on a perch and then scan the sky, go out and accost an insect in midair, bring it back to their perch, inject paralytic venom, and then withdraw the liquefied contents of the insect as they feed. Well, wasps also figure prominently in science and invention. The creature on the left there is a American bee wolf wasp. It is so named because this is a solitary wasp that hunts bees as food for its larval offspring. Now, in Europe, the naturalist Nico Tinbergen studied a bee wolf there and learned how the insect finds its burrow after it covers it up and then goes hunting and returns. How does it find that burrow again? And it turns out that they use subtle landmarks around the around their burrow to determine where that hole is and to return precisely to it. So Tinbergen shared part of the 1973 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine with Konrad Lorenz and Carl von Frisch. And the ironic thing is that von Frisch studied honeybees, which were the prey item of the European bee wolf. Now, I think all of those three individuals got along just fine, thank you. But I think that's kind of humorous that Tinbergen was studying the predator of von Frisch's bees. On the other side of this slide here, we have a paper wasp, and she's scraping plant fibers, woody plant fibers, to chew up into paper that will then go into adding on to the paper nest that she lives on. And there's some debate about whether or not that was the original inspiration for paper as invented by the Chinese. But it's definitely the case that when conventional sources of material for paper became scarce in Europe in the 1700s, that a naturalist there did observe paper wasps and suggested wood fibers as an alternative source for raw material for paper, and therefore we have the paper manufacturing process that we have in use still today. Okay, well, what is a wasp? We've been talking about them, but we really haven't defined what they are yet. So let's dig into that. Wasps are members of the order Hymenoptera, along with ants and bees, and what I have come to call proto-wasps, which are the sawflies and horntails, which are the predecessors to what we consider true wasps. The sawflies and horntails have the abdomen broadly joined to the thorax, so it looks like kind of one unit there, whereas true wasps have a wasp waist, a very a constriction between the apparent abdomen and the apparent thorax. And I say apparent because in reality, the hindmost section of the thorax is the first segment of the abdomen. Now, I don't know who figured that out, but so consequently, people who study wasps and also ants and bees, which have similar body structures, refer to the abdomen as the gaster, or the rearmost portion of the abdomen. Why is this so? Well, the that tiny wasp waist allows for the greater movement of the abdomen. And if you're a stinging insect, you want to be able to move your abdomen where your stinger, where you need it. And so that constriction there allows you to do that. It should be mentioned that the protowasps, the sawflies and the horntails, they are vegetarian in their larval state. So sawflies typically feed on foliage. They have caterpillar-like larvae in many cases. Uh, Horntails and wood wasps, their larvae bore in the wood of trees. The rest of the wasps, with the exception of the gall wasps and some subsets of other families, are definitely parasitoid in nature, or carnivorous or predatory in the case of social wasps. Now, not all wasps can easily be recognized as wasps, and many of them have wingless females. And so all of the ones shown here are female wasps that happen to be wingless. And the most infamous of these are the velvet ants. There's a whole family, the Mutilidae, where the female is wingless and the male is winged. And there's can be a great size difference between the male and the female. Sometimes he's much larger than the female, and in mating may literally sweep her off her feet and mate in midair. But there are several other species in other families of wasps that have wingless females as well. Well, if you're looking to identify wasps, what are some of the ways you can do that beyond simply recognizing them as part of the order Hymenoptera? Well, one could be the host or prey that they're attacking if you happen to see them with another insect. So, for example, the European paper wasp on the left there, she's a predator and she's going to go after pretty much any insect she can attack. And in this case, it's a flesh fly. And she'll chew up that flesh fly into a ball of goo and take it back to the nest and feed her larval sisters directly. But in the solitary wasps, typically like the mason wasp in the center there, the female is hunting hosts one by one and then mass provisioning them in a nest that she has somewhere else. And so she's not chewing up the victim, but paralyzing it and then taking it back to the nest. Many wasps, as we already established, are very tiny, and so they can carry out their entire life cycle inside the egg of another insect. And so the two examples on the far right, that's what's happening there. The host is, or the wasp is looking for the host egg that she can inject her own egg into, and then her larval offspring will mature within that egg and emerge as an adult wasp from that host egg. There's many families of wasps that have this strategy of being egg parasitoids. And sometimes you don't even need to see the wasp to identify it because it's left some other kind of sign to indicate what it is. I love potter wasp nests. They're about the size of a marble, and they're often these beautiful spherical objects with this neck and fluted lip, where the mother wasp deposits her caterpillar prey items as food for her offspring before sealing that entrance there. There's spider wasps that build similar nests, not quite as pretty maybe. And here we have in the center, we are showing the exit holes where the adult wasp has emerged after being growing up inside there. And then the pipe organ mud daubers build these wonderful nests that look like pipe organs. And each one of those tubes, by the way, is more than one cell. So it's a series of cells. The longest tube there probably has, about 4 cells that are partitioned off internally in that long cell. Sometimes wasps leave other clues behind, and among them are cocoons. And so on the left, we have the cocoon of a braconid wasp that is a parasitoid of adult lady beetles. And so this is a very interesting story. The female wasp not only injects an egg into the host beetle, but she delivers a virus with it. And that virus does two things. First of all, it suppresses the beetle's immune system so that it doesn't recognize that a foreign agent has invaded its body. And then the second thing it does is at a certain point, it turns off or commandeers the nervous system of the host, such that when the mature wasp larva exits the host and spins a cocoon, the beetle doesn't leave it. It instead guards that cocoon and is kind of a robot guardian, if you will, driven by this virus that the female wasp had delivered when she delivered her egg. The center photo is a now empty cocoon of a Ichneumon wasp that is a parasitoid of spiders. And I can never catch these things in the act. I always come across the, the cocoons, the empty cocoons in the web of the host, and they can easily be mistaken for a grass seed. And in fact, I'm sure I've overlooked dozens of these uh, wasp cocoons because I thought they were just debris in the spider web. And then on the right, we have a caterpillar that is way done for. And one female wasp laid numerous eggs into this caterpillar. Maybe she only laid one egg and then it split into multiple embryos. It's a phenomenon called polyembryony that many wasps are capable of doing. And what you're seeing there that looks like shotgun, somebody unloaded a shotgun on it. Those are the exit holes where uh, the larval wasps emerged and went off to spin their own cocoons. Well, wasps are so successful that a complicating factor in trying to identify them is that there's many other insects that look like wasps or even behave like them. And so we have like the real wasp on the left there, an eastern yellow jacket, but in the center we have a flower fly or syrphid fly, of which there are hundreds of species, most of which that look like wasps. And then on the right, we have, well, a longhorned beetle, the locust borer, that is on goldenrod there, and it's carrying a pattern of black and yellow that also resembles a wasp. And so when you look like a wasp and you act like a wasp, predators conclude that you are a wasp and leave you alone. So with that in mind, I want to do a quick exercise with you here, and you can unmute for this. I want you to tell me wasp or not wasp. And I'm going to give you examples here, and they could either be one a wasp and one not a wasp, or they might both be wasps, or maybe neither of them are wasps. But it's a good exercise for just here for discerning what is a mimic and what is not. So with that, I'll open the floor for this particular slide.
One wasp.
Number two appears to be a moth.
Okay, we have a vote for a moth for number two.
It's a Sicilian moth, number two.
Oh, you guys are too good.
Is that a tenuchin?
No,
No, actually,
Sicilian.
actually, it is a clear-wing moth that has, in this case, not clear wings, but orange scales on those wings.
Oh,
And the wasp is what's on the left there, and it's a pompilid that is. It looks like a tarantula hawk, but it's not nearly that big. But I can tell you, when I saw the moth flying, I totally thought it was a wasp until it landed. So a lot of these insects that are mimics not only just look like wasps, but they behave very, very much like them. Okay, one more here.
I think the
These
middle
are
one
all,
was a syrphid.
yeah.
Okay, we have a fly as the
Three
not
wasps.
no okay. A fly as for number two, wasp for number three so far.
It looks like number three is a wasp too. It looks like it.
right?
I vote that they're all wasps.
All wasps.
I would say the same for number two as a wasp. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see how you all did.
Oh, square.
Yeah, I apologize slightly for the middle photo because it's a head-on shot, and so it's hard to tell how long those antennae are, and it's got part of the antennae up to its face anyway there. Um, Flies typically have much shorter antennae than wasps, not always, but mostly they do. And they have really big eyes, flies do. And this is one of the few wasps that has really large eyes as well, but it is indeed one of the square-headed wasps. Uh, the sawfly there has kind of a triangular head. That's a good way to recognize those. But the bee, that fooled me also, if that makes you feel any better. But I put that up somewhere for identification and was told that no, it's a cuckoo bee. And a lot of the cuckoo bees, because they don't harvest pollen themselves, but instead exploit the pollen stored by their host bees, they don't have the pollen collecting hairs. And in fact, they're almost totally hairless, and so they can easily be confused for a wasp. So there's no shame in that.
I would say the mandibles on the square-headed wasp too kind of give it away.
Ah, excellent. Yeah, see, it's all in the details. Thank you
Yeah.
for pointing that out. That's very true. Okay, well, now that you're excited about wasps, you might want to ask, well, okay, how do we observe them? What kind of tools do we need? Well, close focusing binoculars are very helpful, actually. So if you're a birder, you can use your binoculars for wasps too. It allows you to get resolve detail at anywhere from 8 to 10 feet, and without scaring the wasp away. And most wasps are very skittish, and they will leave the vicinity if you get too close to them. But if you're also fearful of being stung, that's another great way to avoid that. A camera is very helpful to take images that you can then upload and get identified later. If you want to get really close to non-stinging wasps, a magnifier is helpful, one of the loops like you see there in the foreground. These days, phones take better pictures than my camera, I think. So, just you could take out your phone too and take pictures of wasps that way. A field guide can be somewhat helpful, and this is not an endorsement of my own guide because, you know, wasps and insects in general are so overwhelmingly diverse, you can't cover all of them in a field guide format. You might, if you're lucky, be able to determine with a field guide what family your creature is in. But as a whole, uh, field guides for insects are a good way to get familiar with insects in general, not a really good way to get down to genus or species. Having a notebook is paramount because you want to note where you were as specifically as possible, the location, when you were, the date and time, what kind of habitat you were in, maybe what kind of weather there was during the day. The more data that you can attach to your observations, the better. Remember, by the way, that some wasps are nocturnal. So if any of you blacklight for moths or beetles or other insects, you're certainly going to see wasps coming in as well. And that's because the ones that are night active are after host insects that are also active at night. And so many of these, again, are going to be very small, as you can see by the weave of the sheet that they're the thread count on the sheets that they're sitting on. But some of the ichneumons are pretty good size. And again, they're after uh, nocturnal hosts for the most part. But yeah, don't neglect looking for them at night at lights. One of the things that is interesting to observe in wasps is sleeping behavior. And so typically around dusk, solitary wasps will look for places to bed down, and they'll adopt some very interesting body postures in order to pass the night. And so, like your mason wasps typically grab onto a, a stem or twig and then kind of hang their body off of that. It looks very uncomfortable to me, but apparently it works for them. And then you have things like the cuckoo wasps that curl their entire bodies around whatever substrate they are attaching to there. And cuckoo wasps can curl into a ball anyway as a defense against their hosts, which are other wasps. And then the thread-waisted wasps are the ones that you might be the most likely to encounter. They're very slender wasps, usually a little under an inch in length. Some of them are much larger than that, however. And they typically grab a twig or stem in their jaws and then prop their bodies at a 90 or 45-degree angle from that stem. And they often do this in groups. And so I've seen situations where there were a number of them on one twig, and it looked like there were seed pods or maybe even flowers drooping off of the stem. And in reality, they were these wasps that had all collected together to spend the night. And some wasps congregate in even larger numbers to pass the night or periods of inclement weather. And this is especially true for blue bunddaubers that will, pack themselves in under door frames or in, recessed alcoves and things to spend the night. Now, these are all males, by the way. So there's no fear. While it looks intimidating, there's no fear of getting stung. You can walk in and out of the door with no problem. Then you have things like the flower wasps there. The males have a pseudo sting, which is a hook-like apparatus at the end of their abdomen that is fixed. A true sting is retractable, by the way, so you're not going to see it until it's embedded in you. But they still look intimidating enough that maybe by gathering in a group like that, they're magnifying their warning colors. Another behavior the wasps engage in a lot is grooming. And this is a wonderful photo opportunity for a number of reasons. Number one, it's one of the few times they sit relatively still for more than a nanosecond. And then in the process of grooming, to keep those antennae and wings and other sensory organs and things in tip-top shape, they expose parts of their bodies that are normally concealed by their wings or other body parts. And so you can get more, better pictures of those features that are normally not visible. Well, wasps, being cold-blooded as all insects are, typically need to warm up to get to full speed. And so you can see wasps that will be kind of sprawled out on warm surfaces. And so they're getting both heat from the substrate they're sitting on, as well as direct sunlight. And many wasps will kind of tip themselves to get the most direct sunlight they can on their abdomens. And then once they are fully charged, so to speak, off they go. Many wasps will drink, and this is especially true for wasps that need water to regurgitate onto their nest building material. So yellow jackets, for example, they need to manufacture saliva to mix with those wood fibers to make the paper for their nest. Mason wasps. Mason wasps typically don't gather mud like bunddaubers, but they carry water in their crop to a piece of dry soil, regurgitate the water onto the dry soil, and make mud that way. So they need to drink more water than most wasps do. Of course, the easiest place to find wasps is when they're feeding on flower nectar, and they tend to prefer flowers that are either white or yellow, and usually either composites, like the cuckoo wasp is visiting that fleabane there in the bottom left, or the flowers that are in an umbel, like the Nissan species there on water hemlock, or flowers that are in racemes, like the mint flower that the great golden digger is visiting. Well, why is this the case? Why do they have a preference for that particular kind of flower structure? Well, number one, it's kind of like one-stop shopping. If you don't need to expend as much energy flying from one flower to another when you can just walk from one flower to another. Number two, typically wasps do not have the long tongue that a bee does or that a butterfly does. And so they need a shallow corolla to reach the nectar. And so these kinds of composites and uh, other kind of conglomerated flowers offer that to them. But it's not always flowers that attract wasps. So many plants produce what are known as extrafloral nectaries. These are structures on other parts of the plant that produce a nectar-like substance. And sunflowers are notorious for this. And so they secrete sweet stuff from the bracts around the flower buds, as the velvet ant and the square-headed wasp are showing, and at the base of leaves, as the cuckoo wasp is going after there. So sometimes a plant doesn't need to be blooming to be attractive to wasps and other insects that feed on nectar. Wasps also will feed on injured plants and trees. And if the sap or plant juices are fermenting, all the better. Apparently, they like their alcohol as much as we do. And so you can find a good variety of wasps in situations like this. They're very approachable when they're feeding. They're so intent on getting what they're after that they kind of ignore other stimuli around them. And another fantastic place to look for wasps and bees and flies and other insects is at aphid colonies. Aphids and scale insects and other kinds of true bugs, when they congregate on plants in large numbers, produce copious amounts of liquid waste called honeydew. And so this is just a bonanza for all kinds of different wasps that come and lap the spewed honeydew off of leaf surfaces. Well, observing nesting wasps is a lot of fun too. And so here we have a couple of sand wasps, and they're what I call kickers because the female wasp creates a kind of oblique, shallow burrow, and she uses spines on her front legs, kind of like rakes, and she literally kind of rows herself through the sand and kicks out an enormous quantity of sand in the course of constructing this underground burrow, which will terminate in a series of radiating cells, each of which will have one of her offspring inside it. And in contrast, we have thread-waisted wasps that make a nearly vertical burrow. And so they have a different way of excavating that. They stick their head in and grab up a wad of soil under their chin and with their front legs fly off with it, drop it, come back, and repeat that process of scooping and distributing. And the beauty of this is that by distributing the debris that comes out of your nest burrow, you're not giving away the location of the burrow itself. And why is that important? Well, this is why. Because there are flies that look for nesting wasps and they go then and lay eggs, or in the case of the satellite fly there, they're called satellite flies because they orbit the wasp that is digging a burrow, looking for an opportunity to lay a living larva in there. So she deposits a tiny maggot at the lip of that nest, and then the maggot crawls into the nest and will feed on whatever the provisions are that the wasp has put in there for her own offspring. And the bee fly on the right, these are called bombers. She's hovering over that burrow and she will be firing her eggs down into that burrow. It's quite something to witness. There are videos out there that show that behavior. It's pretty amazing. Well, another thing you're pretty certain to see is in wasps is mating. I mean, like most insects, they're very good at feeding and very good at making more wasps. And so if you see wasps stacked on top of each other, you're looking at least one male, sometimes more than one male, by the way, and then a female on the bottom. And in the case of the Aramnophila there on the right, these wasps can be connected and still perform as if they are one wasp. They can fly perfectly well as a tandem, And the female can go on about multitasking. She can visit flowers. She can hunt prey even. In some cases, I've seen that where she goes on about her tasks with a male attached to her. Sometimes it's more complicated than that. The male shield-handed wasps, and these are wasps that are about 5 to 7 millimeters long, have these enormous plates attached to their forearms. And so they use those to cover the eyes of the female. And it doesn't blind her, but apparently it filters light such that she recognizes this light pattern, meaning that, okay, he's the same species as I am. That's one theory. Another theory is that there are pheromones involved that are produced by these shield-like uh, 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 flanges on the legs as well. So that's how little we know about what's going on with this particular kind of wasp. That said, no means no, and females are very good at telling males to go somewhere else. And so here we have two examples where the females are positioning their bodies in a manner that says, no, I do not want any part of you. And so they are making it very difficult for the male to engage with her. Male solitary wasps often engage in territorial behavior. On the left, we have a wasp that is scent marking that grass blade. And that tells other wasps of his kind, this is my territory and you need to get out. And on the other side, we have this stink bug hunter with these enormous eyes that he uses to be on the lookout for passing females and also rival males that he needs to chase off. And I swear that is the fastest flying insect I've ever seen. They perch on, on the tops of weeds typically. And in mid to late summer, you can see these pretty regularly in fields. And so they'll be sitting there and then they'll be gone in an instant. And it's like if you blink, you'll miss them leave. And then in another couple seconds, they'll be back like they're time traveling or somebody beamed them up. I mean, it's really spectacular behavior. And they're easy to photograph because they'll come back to whatever perch they have left. Cicada killers do the same kind of behavior, and of course they're much larger, and so people get freaked out because there's this male cicada killer sitting on a on a perch, and the average person doesn't know that male wasps can't sting, and because they're territorial, they will definitely chase off other organisms and sometimes direct their perceived aggression in your direction, and it can be very frightening to people that don't know that this is all a bluff. Well, when you make observations, it's great if you would please share your work and on these internet platforms and phone apps that are available now. iNaturalist seems to be the preferred one. And of course, that iNaturalist covers the entire globe and every kind of living thing. Project Noah is very similar, but it doesn't have a batch upload option like iNat. And it's maybe a little bit more student friendly, but both places are excellent for even just browsing. Even if you don't contribute observations, there are some phenomenal photographs on both places. Bugguide.net is the premier website for all terrestrial arthropods of North America. So that includes spiders, insects, scorpions, other kinds of arachnids, centipedes, millipedes, terrestrial and freshwater crustaceans. They're all covered by Bug Guide. The only thing that's not covered there are marine arthropods. So that's a great place to go to, as is iNaturalist, for trying to identify things that you have found. Well, what can we do to enhance wasp diversity in our own yards and gardens, or and by extension, appeal to other insects as well? Well, one thing I like to say is be weed tolerant. I mean, if you have a noxious weed that's state or federally listed, yeah, that's got to go. That's a really bad thing. There's a reason it's on the most wanted list. But if it's something else, chances are it's either native or it's naturalized and therefore is going to be compatible with native bees, wasps, butterflies, other insects. So before you yank the buckwheat or the goldenrod, give a thought to the fact that they're helpful in providing nectar and pollen for insects. Maybe you want to go a step further, and if you can, it's great. And that's by landscaping with native plants as much as possible, or mix it up with native plants with you know other uh, kinds of flowers that may not be native but are very attractive to pollinators and uh, including butterflies, bees, and wasps. One other thing you can do is provide housing, and these structures are typically known as bee blocks or bee condos because there are cavity nesting solitary bees that use them, such as leafcutter bees and mason bees. Uh, but they will also be used by some kinds of solitary wasps. And well, do they work? Um, well, yeah. This is when we lived in Colorado. We had a bee block that was used by at least two different kinds of mason wasps, and we could tell when the nest was completed because there'd be a mud cap on the end of the over the hole there. There are other interesting wasps that also use cavities, and one of the most interesting is the grass carriers. They could easily be mistaken for mud daubers. They're the same size and similar body shape, but they instead of building mud nests, they use pre-existing cavities and line them with grass. And you'd think, well, okay, they probably just pick up pieces of dead grass and stuff them in there. Well, no, they actually, as the bottom photo shows, they actively cut pieces of living grass and use that in their nest building. Uh, 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 and they feed, or well, I should say, they provision their nests with small katydids and tree crickets. And because there are fewer and fewer natural cavities for them to nest in, they've taken up using the tracks of sliding windows and doors. And so people will open their sliding glass window or door and go, wow, why do I have grass and worms and dead crickets in my window track? And it's these wasps that are taking advantage of that or well, I shouldn't say natural cavity, that cavity, that man-made cavity, since they're having a harder time finding cavities that they would in nature. Well, if you put out bee blocks, you're also going to have parasitoid wasps that attack the bees and the wasps that nest in them. And so here we have on the left-hand side a leucospidid, and she is drilling her ovipositor right through the wood into the cavity beneath it that houses her host insect, host wasp or bee that she's after. That's pretty remarkable how she can penetrate the wood that way with such a slender filament, but that she does. And then on the other side, we have the wild carrot wasp or gastropteid, and she uses her long ovipositor typically to penetrate the mud cap on a finished cell, and then she penetrates other cells with that ovipositor, the partitions within the cavity. And lastly, these are my favorites. If you have a bee block, you're almost certainly going to see these jewels that are known as cuckoo wasps or chrysalids, typically about 5 to 7 millimeters long, brilliantly metallic. They're so bright that it doesn't matter that they're small. You can see them a mile away. And so they'll look for opportunities to invade the nest of that is being provisioned by either a female bee or wasp. And I'd like to end this evening with a quote that I really love from Howard E. Evans. He's a he's now the late Howard Evans, but he wrote a number of books about entomology for general audiences, including one called Wasp Farm that is a he and his wife bought a dilapidated farm in upstate New York just because it had so many different habitats that wasps lived in. And so it was his literal wasp farm. But this quote is from his other book known as Life on a Little Known Planet. He says, I happen to like yellow jackets. Do I not have a right to yellow jackets if my neighbor has a right to a cat? If freedom means anything at all, it means the right to choose one's environment and one's friends. And I agree. And not only that, the thing of it is that, I can't write about wasps and other misunderstood insects and not recognize that, we treat certain artificial subsets of humanity the same way with fear and loathing and disrespect and misunderstanding. And is for that reason that from this point forward, I'm not going to be doing any more books about insects specifically. Um, I'm turning my attention to how we resolve these conflicts between humanity and other species in general, and humanity and other segments of humanity. We're not going to solve the biodiversity crisis or the climate change crisis or any other kind of crisis until we start learning how to be good to each other. And so that's going forward what I want to do. And with that said, if you still are on board with me, you might like these other titles as well. Insectpedia is my latest. I have another one forthcoming called Bug Watching, the art, joy, and importance of observing insects. And that'll be coming out late summer, early fall, also from Princeton University Press. Thank you. Thank you, Fred, for inviting me here and hosting the meeting. My partner, Heidi Eaton, for putting up with me while I put these programs together. Unipress Books is the one that I did the Wasp book for, and they're a book packager. And so they partnered with Princeton University Press to put the book out. If you go to the PUP's publisher site and use the discount code ERE30, that should be good for a 30% discount on any of my books there. And I want to thank my mentors, past, present, and future. I didn't learn everything I shared with you tonight all on my own. I've had marvelous coaching by many people. These days, I'm learning from younger people. And all of you here for attending. Thank you.
Wonderful, Eric. Thank you so much. That was seriously a good presentation, and we appreciate it. Um, before all the students depart, I have a number of students who came on tonight. Please, every student, put your name in the chat box so I can take the attendance. And if you're with Professor Lamb's class, put Lamb next to your name. I'm pretty sure I realized that, but just to make sure, I got most of you. Um, I have a question for you, Eric, or actually a couple questions, and absolutely anybody who has questions, just raise your hand. I can see you're in the chat box. Um, so we can take other questions. I can start off with one of them. So I wanted to ask about the viruses that you mentioned. Okay. And here's our overlap to the microbiology world for my students who are still listening, because I thought it was fascinating to hear about a virus taking control of the ladybug beetle and essentially turning it into a zombie and suppressing its immune system. I mean, how crazy is that? Do you know which family of viruses are we talking about? Is it a Bunyaviridea? Is it one of the, well, probably an insect-related virus, but just wonder if you knew offhand.
Yeah, collectively they're called poly-DNA viruses.
Okay.
And um, I think it's braconviruses that are produced by braconid wasps, and then I'm not sure if that also applies to Ichneumon wasps or not, but I'm pretty sure both families are able to do that, and not all of them, just certain subsets of those two families. Yeah.
Poly-DNA virus, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, what family? Maybe uh
Certainly Braconidae. That's Braconidae.
yeah, are the
And
type of wasps.
yeah.
Okay, yeah, I knew that. Viral family.
Oh, that I don't know. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's okay. I
Yeah.
was just curious because I found it fascinating to hear about that. And your pictures about the nest parasitism, awesome pictures. And the little bomber fly that actually shoots the eggs out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Usually the wasp is not occupying the wasp or bee is not occupying the hole when that happens. But yeah. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Um, Anybody else? Please raise your. Okay, Professor Hal.
Hi. Uh, I know that songbirds and some dragonflies that are territorial have characteristic sexual dimorphism, and I was wondering if that's a characteristic of the territorial wasps.
Oh, excellent question.
Really?
Um, well, for that stink bug hunter, that's definitely the case. The male has these enormous holoptic eyes, as you saw in that photo. The female does not. She has regular, widely separated eyes because she's only going uh, after hosts, which she probably detects more with her antennae than she does with her eyes anyway. So uh, that's the most graphic example of a territorial wasp I can think of that has that kind of dimorphism. There's certainly velvet ants obviously have graphic sexual dimorphism in that the males are winged and the females are not, but they don't engage in territoriality.
Is the stink bug hunter known to prey on marmorated stink bug, the introduced stink bugs that are a problem?
Well, there's several members of the genus Astata and Dryudella, and the Dryudella is pretty small, so I would be surprised if it took stink bugs. Then there's another genus altogether, Bicertes, that's a sand wasp, and they definitely take brown marmorated stink bugs because they're a larger wasp. Astata, I don't know. That's a really good question. I mean, we have them in our yard here in Kansas, but I haven't seen them take a host yet, so I'm not sure what they're. We have a lot of stink bug diversity here too, so I'm not sure.
Okay, yeah, I'm just curious since, I know they're not as problematic. The stink bugs aren't as bad as they were when they first came out because predators are surfacing now that are using them. So, um, it was interesting that you mentioned these stink bug hunters take them like that. So I just thought I'd ask. Um, Dave, go ahead and ask. I see you have a question. Please speak up. Yeah, go right ahead.
Thanks, Fred. Very enlightening talk, Eric. I was delighted to see you mention alophids at the beginning of your talk. I've come across many of them from the genus Paraolinx in cattails, and they are the tiny parasitoids of Microlepidoptera larvae that feed inside the seed head. Have you come across a key that could be used to ID them down to species?
Oh God. No. um,
Okay.
I've but it gives me a chance to plug something though. There is a WASP ID course now that's been going. I think let's see, I think it started in 2021. and it happens every January, like the first part of January, and it's run by Penn State University, or at least it has been, but there was grad students doing it, so I'm not sure if they're elsewhere now. But if you go to WASP ID, if you just Google WASP ID course, there is a website for it, and it should give you information on how to enroll in the next one. The thing I loved about it is that it's global, so it includes families of wasps that are not necessarily found in North America, but they use uh, museum specimen materials and put them under a microscope live, so you can look at the different characteristics and things. And then they have, tests, obviously, that use the same kind of specimen images, and you can try and identify them to family. But when you start looking at chalcidoids like eulophids, if you can even get to family, you're accomplishing more than I usually can. So I mean, I know the Canadian Department of Agriculture produced a book on genera of Chalcidoidea, but that's been many years ago, and it's probably outdated now. I mean, I've got it in my library, but I don't reference it too much, and it doesn't include like the platygastrids and the other near chalcidoids like I wish it did. Um, but yeah, that's as far as I know. I mean, you'd have to go to individual journal articles, I think, to get species keys.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
have
Thanks.
some nice comments in the chat, Eric, for you. I just thought I'd mention. Um, we see from. Sorry, it's hopping around on me here.
While you're looking, I
Yeah,
was going to say
I'm
maybe
sorry.
this is an example of something that can be helped a lot by artificial intelligence. The thing that you just mentioned that it's really, really hard to separate the families even.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even iNaturalist is getting a little bit better. The algorithm is learning off of itself, and so they're not making quite as extreme wrong posits now as it used to. But yeah, you're right. I mean, the predictive artificial intelligence is very helpful. The generative artificial intelligence, not so much. I mean, now we're getting, you know, uh, AI art of wasps and other creatures that just flat out don't exist, and people don't know the difference. And from a science communication standpoint, that really um, that really burns my butt. Here I'm going to all the trouble of trying to communicate factual things, and it's getting undermined by some of these other things. But enough about that.
Yeah.
It happens a lot nowadays. So one of the comments um, from Andrea Couch says, I second the WASP ID course. So well done and very reasonably priced. You leave that course with a lot of new knowledge and even more resources. Nancy says, thank you, wonderful. Love the way you organized via activity. Um, and then Andrea says, I also purchased your book after taking that course, Eric. So wonderful. Um, Numerous people. Anthony says, wonderful presentation. Thank you very much. Anthony, I'm not familiar with you, Anthony. If you happen to be one of the students, please type your name on the chat so I can take it down. And if not, well, thank you for joining us anyway, but hope you come back again to see us. Ashley, one of the students is Ashley, says, thank you for your time in this wonderful presentation, very informative. Um, And Nancy says, in 2024, WASP course was hosted from Penn State, but instructors from around the globe. Excellent. One of my students had a question too. She says she was curious, how many kinds of wasp are there around the world? And I don't know if you have a rough estimate of that
I
from
I do
Ashley.
I do not, and I that sounds like I'm evading the question, but in all honesty, um, since my book came out, there's been like, oh, at least half a dozen or more new families of wasps that have been described. So, you know, basically, if an insect is not of economic importance, either in a positive or negative fashion, we really don't know much about it. We may not even know it exists. And so, and then there's cryptic species that can only be discerned through molecular DNA analysis, or in some cases, they can be things can be genetically identical but have different behaviors, like fireflies. Some can only be separated by their flash patterns. So, you know, I mean, if I'm being a complete jerk, I'd say, well, what do you mean by species? I mean, you know, I think things are changing so rapidly that it's really difficult to get a grasp on it. I mean, I think, you know, it's important for us to continue collecting specimens and collecting observations on through community science to advance that. And I really don't know that. Gosh, I don't want to say that question's not relevant, because I like the way you think if you're asking that, but I don't I don't know anybody who could answer that with any kind of divinity, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a hard question to answer, I know. But there's thousands of them for
Oh
sure.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. We have a lot of thank yous from different folks, my students, and some of the other students from our college. Awesome presentation. Thank you for the informative presentation. Thanks for this knowledge. Obviously, we'll appreciate these wasps now. That's a that's a good one because and the truth is that people haven't seen or heard about this stuff before. So now, just to see something like this, it does give you an eye opener and some appreciation more than ever before. So, um, and
Well, I appreciate the compliments, and the whoever said thank you for organizing it by behavior. That's really helpful. I appreciate that feedback. It means I'm doing the right kind of thing for engagement. But
mhm.
if you any of you have any questions after this, that you think of later, please feel free to email me. That's why I put
um,
my contact information there. So,
thank you for that. We
yeah,
do have
you
a question on the chat also. Can I ask that for well, one comment was at this time, no plans for a course in 2025, but we are hopeful a future session may be offered in the coming years due to continuing interest. And Dr. Frank Hansen asks, um, notable, he says here, huge differences in anatomy of abdomens. What is the physiological correlate?
um, I'm not sure I understand the question.
Oh, Dr. Hansen, if you're on, please unmute yourself and ask your question. It's great if you just want to speak directly.
No, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
So it was really obvious when you were going through the anatomy of this and that, and the anatomy of the abdomens with this wasp waist, but even some were huge wasp waists, and some were small and thin, and some
Yeah.
were, is it because the ones that have the thick one, eat plant X, and those that have the very, very thin with a very fine connection with the thorax, only eat what fluids um, from prey, insect prey, such as as larvae, or it just how do you explain that? How do you explain that huge diversity of of these structures in there?
Okay. Okay, now I follow. Okay. Um, yeah, the proto wasps that have their abdomen broadly joined to the thorax, excuse me. Yeah, they're not they don't need the mobility that the parasitoid wasps do because they're inserting their eggs into foliage or into in the case of the horntails, they're drilling into wood to insert their eggs. So that they don't need as much flexibility in that realm.
Mhm.
With the ones that have the narrow, long petiole between the thorax and the gaster, that allows them to bend under prey and sting it more precisely.
From below.
Exactly. Yeah, because they're after certain nerve centers in the host to affect paralysis.
Mhm.
And
So
no, by the way, I'm glad you brought up feeding because as adults, I just learned this myself recently and it makes perfect sense. But no adult wasps that we know of feed on solid food. As adults, they feed only on liquid food. It's the larval stage that consumes solids. So I found that very, very interesting.
Oh yeah, interesting. Yeah. One other thing is that I know there's a number of flies that when they lay eggs, they blow it out, otherwise known as blowflies. Uh, and so it's interesting. We've got some wasps that do the same. Enjoyed your talk immensely.
Thank you.
What one other question? Actually, there's more. Getting bombarded tonight, Eric. So, Anthony asks, I've read that there is support to believe that wasps may be more species diverse than beetles. Do you feel that there is evidence to support that?
Uh, I would think so, simply because of the diversity of hosts and the specificity of hosts that wasps have a relationship to. So, like, there's a graphic in my book that I created that shows how one moth, for example, can be attacked in several different life stages. So by wasps. So like you have your egg parasitoids that attack the egg stage of a Lepidoptera, for example. Then you have wasps that attack the caterpillar stage and may exit from the caterpillar as adult offspring, or they may go through until the chrysalis stage and exit from that. Then you have um, so things like ichneumons, for example, would attack caterpillars. But then you have the thread-waisted wasps that attack the caterpillar and mass provision with it. So you've got all these different strategies of different wasps attacking the same host. That's why I think um, there's good reason to believe that wasp diversity might trump the diversity of any other kind of insect. Is that one host can be exploited by numerous different kinds of wasps.
That's interesting. I always heard, traditionally that beetles were by far the largest diverse group of insects on Earth. So this would be pretty cool if that turns out to be the case with
Well,
wasps.
beetles are very charismatic insects. I love them too. and they've gotten a lot more attention than most other insects, aside from butterflies and moths. I think because of how colorful and diverse they are. So yeah, we have some catching up to do in the wasp world.
So I'm still reading chats. We have a comment from Bill Murphy, and he asks that I was lucky enough to have worked with Arnold Menke, Eric Gristle, Bob Kula, Sean Brady, Michael Gates, and Dave Smith, Dr. Horntail, he called him. Most of them have passed, which might mean there are employment opportunities in Hymenoptera taxonomy um, for some of these students. I'm a dipterist, and job opportunities have been increasing recently. Do you know how the near future job market might look for Hymenopterists?
Excellent question, and I would add Justin Schmidt to that distinguished group of people as well. But yeah, Arnold Menke and Eric Grizel are two good friends of mine. And Eric is a great writer, by the way. So he's been a mentor to me in writing as well as knowledge of Hymenoptera. But
Mhm.
yeah, I think because, well, here's one reason for sure why there's going to be more job opportunities. The spotted lanternfly is the latest and greatest invasive critter to come over. But because we have this unfettered and probably going to be even more deregulated in the coming years global economy with relaxed port inspections and greater consumer demand, we're going to have a lot more unwelcome species coming over that are going to have an economic impact. And because of that, we're going to want to know what kinds of wasps can we bring in to deal with those. So I think for that reason alone, there's going to be a lot more attention uh, to use employing Hymenoptera as biological controls. There already is. They're reared in nectaries, or excuse me, insectaries for dispersal into agricultural fields for control of crop pests. But that's going to become an even uh, uh, more important and greater pursuit, I think, with a relaxed regulation of global economics. So, yeah, I think for that reason alone, um, but people interested in evolution and ecology are also going to be studying wasps as examples, as subjects for that too. So, yeah, definitely. I think it's a very bright future.
That's a good analysis of it because I'm afraid you're probably right about that. And I don't know, just the ominous future that, and I'm speculating, but we may see um, relaxed standards, if we want to put it that way, which will lead to introduction of a lot of pests. I hate to think that, but it could happen, and the leanings seem to be going in that direction. So only time
Well,
will tell, of course.
well, we just voted politically, but those votes are important when they happen. But what's really important is how you vote in the marketplace daily. So, if you're not consuming exotic plants, for example, to grow in your garden, you're helping by not doing that. And so, we have a lot of power as consumers, and whether we choose to exercise that or not is the big question, I think. Um, I shoot, I like my coffee and my bananas and things too, and so I bear some responsibility myself, of course. So, and I don't think people should be shamed for their choices, but just maybe be mindful of them and prioritize our biodiversity and uh, climate mitigation as a part of that.
They were the previous comment that Bob Murphy put in there. Bill Murphy wrote about some of these folks have passed. I'm not sure which ones have passed, but I do know that Bob Kula and Sean Brady, Michael Gates at the Smithsonian, and I'm pretty sure they're doing well. But perhaps there's some of the other ones that I'm not familiar with. I don't know.
Well, Dave Smith has passed
He
sadly.
has, yeah.
He was, he identified my sawflies, and some of those are now in the Smithsonian as a result of that too. So,
Okay.
I think the Smithsonian must have at least 1,000 jars of alcoholic specimens of all kinds of flies and wasps that Dave collected over the years at his station between DC and Manassas, Virginia, that are just available for anybody who wants to go on a treasure hunt.
Wow. Yeah. All right. Well, if there's any other questions, now's the time, or we can let Eric off the hook here. He's been very kind to stay on and answer a plethora of questions, and we thank you for that, Eric.
of
And
course.
absolutely. We're still getting a lot of comments. I enjoyed from Steve Plum. I enjoyed this a lot. Very informative. Also appreciate the post-talk discussion. So thank you also, Steve, for joining us. And thanks to Entomo for posting the details. So we'll make sure that we post things there in the future always so people can log into our meetings.
Well, I just want to say before my wife yanks me over for dinner here, that this has been good for me too. I mean, a lot of us who work independently sometimes think, we wonder if we're making an impact, or if there anybody else out there that is on the same wavelength, and I really appreciate hearing from all of you. Thank you very much.
We thank you, Eric. Uh, Everybody can applaud or put a little icon up there, applause. Everyone really appreciated the talk tonight. Thank you for your time. In fact, we'll be in touch. Um, we'll send you some emails, and we have a journal we're going to send you, and you're also an honorary member for a year with MES. Our editor Gene will contact you shortly, probably tomorrow or something.
Tomorrow.
Okay, and please stay in touch with us, and we'll look for your books. Particularly, I like to get the Wasp Diversity book. I think that's pretty cool. You said you posted the link for that?
Well, if you look up my name and Wasps and Princeton University Press, it should get you to the page for the book. And
Okay.
yeah, if you use the discount code ERE30, that should still work. And if it doesn't work for a 30% discount, let me know and I'll have that rectified.
ERE30. Okay. Thank you. I'm familiar with Princeton University books. They always have a lot of good books, and they very reasonably priced too. So all right then. So MES members can stay on. We'll have a business meeting after this, but everybody else who's guest or whatever wish to leave may obviously do so. And Eric, thanks again for a really wonderful talk, wonderful pictures.
No, you're welcome. I appreciate the compliments.
Very much so.
Yes,
Oh,
indeed.
Indeed. Thank you very much.
okay. And Bill, you